Hello, everybody. Can you let me know if you can hear me and see me? See some people out there. Oh, see there. Muted camera. Hello, everybody out there. I can see that people are on. Can you hear me? Hey, Chris Wong is there. Okay. You can hear me, Chris? I assume you can hear me? I'm just using my regular microphone because it's, or my computer audio because it seems when it seems when I use my microphone, things get a little bit weird. So I'm just going to hold off here to 2 o'clock to see if we can get some more people on before I start my official one. Yeah. Okay. Excuse me. Yeah, we lost people. It's supposed to be getting more people. There, we're back up to 7 people. Excellent. 9. Hello, everybody. I'm just waiting for a few more people to come on before we officially get started. Just waiting to get some people here. I don't know how many people to expect, so. While we're waiting, I'm gonna try something. No, I'm not gonna do that. Never mind. That will make things harder than it needs to be. Excuse me. These are my train on impulse records right here. You see right there, the orange spine. Very recognizable spine, those impulse records. Okay, just another minute and then we'll get started. Anybody having trouble hearing me? Sound is okay. Video looks a little grainy, but I'm much better to listen to than I am to see, so that shouldn't be a problem. Excellent. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. Glad to hear. Okay. So I don't know, I've been on for 6 minutes. Seems like now would probably be a good time to start. So, and I'm sure more people will come on, or maybe more people won't come on. I'm not sure. But anyways, I can't see everybody that's online, so I don't know. I can see some people who are in the chat, and I know some of you, and I don't know some of you. But my name's Cory Weeds, and I live here in Vancouver, BC, Canada. And I thought this would be kind of a good idea to do because of late I have been fielding a lot of calls and emails asking if I have time to chat and if I have time to offer some advice and answer some questions, which of course, time permitting, I'm always more than happy to do. I love talking about this stuff, but I thought it might be a good idea to do something like this. I thought maybe I would make it weekly or bi-weekly or bi-monthly or something. I'm not sure. But for those of you that know me, this will be some review. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a saxophonist first. I'm a musician first, but I also own the Cellar Music Group, which kind of combines all of my activities. The record label being probably the biggest one. I kind of manage my playing career through that. Also, my presenting career, whether it's at Frankie's Jazz Club or various other things. I book tours for people. I do a jazz radio show. Before all this madness of COVID started, I was doing annual tours to New York City. So I've kind of done pretty much everything there is to do on the jazz scene, really. And what I can tell you is I've made a ton of mistakes, and I continue to make mistakes because that's personally the way that I learn, and the way that I adjust and the way that I improve. I'm sure there is a book out there called Music Business for Dummies. But everybody's journey in this music is so unbelievably different. I can't think of another career off the top of my head that is so different. Like, everybody's journey is so different to get to where they want to get to. So Music Business for Dummies can certainly give you some pointers and offer some suggestions and give you some real world stuff. But what I'm hoping to achieve by doing this is give you some real world examples of being in the music business. And as I said, I've made every mistake there is to make, I think. And it's made things, well, at the outset, it's made things harder, but in the long run, it's made things much easier. So this is a little bit risky, I guess, with only 11 people online. But my goal here, I don't have a script or anything that I'm reading and having a bunch of stuff that I want to tell you about. Really, what I want is I would love for you to post questions in the comments section to get this thing started off. As I said in the advertisement, there's no question that's off limits. Of course, as long as it's music or jazz related, certainly no questions off limits. And, I'll give you my honest answers and my honest opinions. So I really did this. I'm really hoping that you're out there and you have questions and you have things that you're looking to get advice on. There are certainly no shortage of topics that I'm willing to talk about. So yeah, let's start it off with some questions in the comments, because that's really going to kick this thing off and we can really get into it. And if there's no questions in the comments, then I'm going to have to improvise here. There you go. Greg Allworth. Thank you very much. I would really like to know about putting out a jazz record in Canada. Greg, can you be a little bit more specific about what you would like to know about? Because I can address putting out a record, period. Or do you have something a little bit more specific? That would really help. So why don't you let me know about that and I'll come back to you. Paul asks, what social sites do I use the most to promote and to get gigs? So I'll tell you, probably one of the things that I'm least well versed in is social media. Social media is a young person's game, I think. But I'm trying really hard. I'm active on social media. I'm active using Instagram. I'm active using Facebook, active using LinkedIn, YouTube. I don't generally use social sites to promote gigs. To get gigs. I use them as promotional tools for gigs that I have upcoming. I use them for promotional tools around the release of albums. I seem to have the most success with Instagram and Facebook. Facebook, a bit of an older demographic, whereas Instagram is a bit of a younger demographic. The problem with social media, of course, is figuring out. Good, Greg. Thank you for getting back. I will get back with you for sure on that. Turning social media into monetary rewards is something that I haven't. Well, first of all, it's extremely hard to measure. But we're talking about me having 2,000, 2,500 followers, on Instagram, which is not a lot. So I use it more as an information portal. I find Instagram the best for that. I'm not a big fan of trying to get gigs using social media, and we can talk more about that. If you'd like me to talk more about that, I'm happy to talk more about, getting gigs and that kind of thing, because that's a question that comes up a lot. So those social sites are the ones that I'm most familiar with, and the ones that I use the most are Instagram and Facebook. There's some really cool things you can do with Instagram now. I find it a little easier to stay out of going down the Instagram, the rabbit hole of social media. Facebook can digress much quicker, in my experience, than Instagram. Ken, there's a lot less political stuff on Facebook. And not that political stuff is bad, but I just find Instagram a little bit more streamlined for what I'm trying to do. Yes. So, okay. So going back to Greg and his question about putting out a record, should we start a label? Just give me a sec, because now the questions are coming in fast and furious, which is awesome. We have a quartet and are ready to record, but unsure how to do promotion. Should we start a label? How do we make it successful? Well, okay. So there's a lot of stuff in there, Greg. So, first of all, I think a lot with all of this stuff, know your audience. Try to know who your audience is. So, Greg, I don't know what you do, what you play, and what kind of music you play. So, from my experience, and this is changing all the time, but of course, the big thing is: do you print CDs? Do you not print CDs? We've heard that vinyl is back in. Should we print vinyl? Should we just go digital? Well, then the whole streaming thing comes up. And how do we turn streaming into monetary success, which is quite difficult to do. Should you start a label? Should you not start a label? First of all, starting a record label is easy. Anybody can start a record label. It depends what you're trying to achieve from that. You start a record label and you can put out one release. You could start a record label and only have that be the portal for your event. Sorry, guys, I'm having some people ask about my event here. This is one of the problems with doing these live things in the chats, is that things are going, and I want to concentrate. So this is a successful thing. But just give me 1 second, and I can answer this. It's one part I don't like about this stuff. Yeah. So, yeah, it depends on what you're trying to do. There's nothing, unless you want to get incorporated and make it super official and it'd be this big thing, you can incorporate and officially become a label. But, Greg, you can start a record label tomorrow and call it Greg Records, come up with a label and start putting your stuff up. What are the benefits to that? I'm not sure what the benefits to that are. It depends on what you're trying to achieve by putting out a record and starting a label. The first and foremost, get your band sounding good, get your band into the studio, and make a great record. But then the next part after that is, of course, you're thinking about promotion, and you're thinking about the best way to promote your record. Well, the best way in this day and age is through touring. And of course, right now things are what they are, and there's not a lot of touring. So you're still going to essentially probably move the most product by selling off stage. Now, again, Greg, not knowing you and not knowing about you, you may have an extremely strong social media presence. So Instagram, I have some friends that I deal with on my label, who have 15,000 followers. So you have better luck and better success at getting streaming numbers when you have those kind of followers. Now, we do quite well on streaming, and I want to address streaming for a minute. And I want to use my words relatively carefully here, but I don't think there is any debate that the streaming sites are not exactly beneficial for musicians. So it goes without saying that we don't like the model. We don't think we're getting paid enough, and we don't think it's fair. However, I have chosen to embrace streaming and do my best to utilize streaming in a way that benefits me and that advances my career and advances the notoriety of the label, etc. It's not easy, but it's here to stay, at least for the foreseeable future, until, I don't know, legislation gets passed. And let's be really honest about it. Is that ever going to happen? Probably not. I'm not saying we shouldn't fight for it, but I've decided to put my efforts into how could I use streaming to my benefit. Now, this also goes without saying, of course, I have a label that has 200 titles to its credit. So I have a little bit of a machine. It's a small machine, but it is a little bit of a machine. So it's a little bit easier to use that machine in order to get some streaming numbers, etc. However, if you get hip to what's happening, on the internet, and get hip to social media and social media promotion and getting your stuff heard, you can have some success streaming. And let me give you a real world example. My last record, Day by Day, which I did with David Hazeltine, which is a nice record. David Hazeltine's a wonderful pianist. He's fairly well known, but we probably generated about $2,700 to $2,800 in streaming revenue. Like, to me, that's not bad. If you match that up with how many times it got played on those streaming sites, it's horrible. But I try to not concentrate on that. I try to concentrate on the gross number of dollars that have come in. So I'm quite happy. With that. I have a great team, a label called La Reserva out of New York City, run by young guys that really know what they're doing as far as that kind of stuff. But there's lots of resources out there in order to get that stuff out there. It's not the kind of thing like anything. If you're unknown and you're just starting out and you're putting out your first record, I think you need to be realistic about what your reach is going to be. Now, maybe you put something out and it hits for one reason or the other, and you sell a whole bunch of CDs and a whole bunch of streaming, which would be awesome. But I think the more realistic expectation is that this is a learning process for you. Recorded music is not going away. The only thing that's changing is the consumption of that music. So that's sort of the streaming side of things. Then you have the physical side of things and this constant struggle around, do I press CDs? Are CDs really gone? Do I press vinyl? So let me address the CD thing first. Again, you have to know your audience. If your music is appealing to a younger audience, chances are you're not going to sell a lot of CDs. And I don't want to pigeonhole certain audiences because that's not fair. But it's you have to look at that. I use my good friend Spike Wilner, who owns Mesro and Smalls, who used to have a label. He kind of still runs his label. But if you look at the demographic of Smalls Jazz Club, it's a younger crowd. And so selling CDs has been a bit tough for him. And I don't want to speak for him, but these are just conversations that we've had. It's a younger demographic. If you come to Vancouver and you come to Frankie's, for example, or the Cellar, you see that it's an older demographic who are still buying CDs. If you are performing in theaters, if you're performing in, performing arts centers or larger type venues, generally the demographic can sometimes be a little older. So CDs are still very relevant in that way. CDs are more relevant in other parts of the world. For example, Japan still buys a lot of CDs. France still buys a lot of CDs. And to be quite honest with you, we sell a lot of physical CDs in the United States. So it's a tough call, but pressing between 500 and 1,000 CDs is probably about where you're going to fall. The second thing, so that's the CD part. Let's deal with the vinyl thing now. Now, everybody says vinyl is coming back. And I do agree that vinyl is coming back. But I don't think you always get the full picture. It's just like, oh, vinyl's coming back. Great. And what's happening is young people are, and I don't know where people are listening from, but we have and I'm just using London Drugs as an example. We have like a drugstore. It's not really a drugstore, though. It's kind of a big, I'm trying to think of the equivalent in the States. It's not a drugstore. They have a pharmacy, but you get everything there, electronics and everything. And now, because vinyl's coming back, they have a vinyl section in the electronics section. And you can go in there and get a Kind of Blue record, Miles Davis Kind of Blue, for $12.99. But what people don't realize is that 99% of the time, that record's pressed from a digital source. And these kids are going in and spending $12.99 because it's cool. And they have Kind of Blue. They don't care whether it's analog or digital. They probably don't even know the difference. But they like the big cover. And that's awesome. I'm not criticizing them. But that doesn't mean that, and that's also Kind of Blue. I don't think they're going into London Drugs and seeing a Cory Weeds record, with all due respect to myself, and saying, hey, Cory Weeds record, I'm going to buy this. So it's a little bit, there's some misinformation around the coming back of vinyl. I also have an archival label that I run with my good friend Zev Feldman, and we're putting out archival releases that are highly curated and highly and very seriously researched, and the packaging is amazing. Those double LPs are selling for $50 or $55 US. Those aren't young people that are buying those because it's expensive. So again, it's about knowing your audience. It's really about knowing your audience and taking some chances and what you're trying to achieve. I mean, remember the download card thing? Like, that was a big thing that didn't last very long. And then USB stick, you could sell USB sticks at your gigs. What I do know from my experience, and keeping in mind that I play straight ahead jazz music, that's kind of where I live. So my demographic is still buying that stuff. I lost my train of thought. But most of my stuff is coming from selling at gigs. That's where I'm selling my product is at gigs. So it's a deeper conversation for sure. But you have to sort of decide for yourself around how much money you're willing to put out. How important is it? Do you think you're going to have better luck doing digital? And there's all kinds of things you can do. Additional tracks for digital releases. You can do short run CDs. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff you can do to help promote and cross promote. And there's a whole host of websites that can help you deal with various things. Then press comes into it. Do you want to do radio? Well, what does well on radio? And what generally does well on jazz radio is stuff that's really straight ahead. Like, as far as big radio in the States and jazz radio in States. Canada, for example, is always looking for Canadian content. So you start a list and you send them physical CDs, and generally they'll get played because these stations are looking for Canadian content because there's Canadian content rules, etc. In the States, you have to figure out kind of what works. Seller Live just happens to put out straight ahead music for the most part, and so we do really well on radio. Press people, we work with a bunch of press people, and I know there's some people listening right now that will not agree with me. Press can be really good, but press is also expensive. So again, it depends on what you're trying to achieve by hiring a press person. What I have found for me and what's made me successful is that we've done really well on radio. And so, like, for example, Ian Hendrickson Smith's release, he's the guy that plays in Jimmy Fallon's The Roots. He's a good friend of mine, saxophone player, put out a release called, I can't believe I can't remember the name of the record. I'm on it. Anyways, it's been on the Jazz Week charts for 16 weeks. So that means that every week, like, it's getting played a lot on the radio and people are hearing it. And hopefully that's driving people to wherever they consume their music, whether it's streaming or Amazon to buy physically or to my website or to Ian's website. Whereas when you do press and you get a write-up in Downbeat magazine, that's awesome. And you take that press clipping and you put it in your press package, but then it kind of goes away. And it's sort of never to be seen again, other than in your press package. This is nothing against press people. I used all kinds of press people to great success and got great reviews and some very good reviews. A lot of them have been on my on the archival side, where we've got a lot of incredible reviews in some very high-end press publications, and then on the Seller Live side, the new music side. Done well too. We've got 2 things coming up in Downbeat that Lydia Liebman, who's a great publicist, got for us, and various other things. So, Greg, it's a much bigger conversation, than what we can have here today. But I hope that answers some of your questions. So I want to move on to some more stuff. D, could you recommend a website style or builder for a music biz? I'm not sure that I totally understand that question. So can you try to clarify it for me, and I'll come back to you? Natalie, do you think the general public understands that the majority of jazz musicians are really indie artists? Do you think promoting that concept will encourage his audience to seek out, discover new local talent? That's a really good question, Natalie. I'm not sure that it will help. The one thing, sometimes the general public, sometimes I don't think we give them enough credit. Sometimes I think we give them too much credit. Like, for example, what I will tell you is, this happens to me all the time. I'll be at a gig and they'll come up and they'll take a look at my CDs and they'll look at the back, and they'll put it back and they'll say, "Oh, are you on Spotify?" I say, "Yeah, I'm on Spotify." "Oh, great. Okay, I'll go home and listen to you on Spotify." They don't realize that, like, you almost gave me $15, and now you're going to go listen on Spotify, and I'm going to get like 0.0001 cent for what you're doing. Sometimes I take that opportunity to try to educate them about what that means, and then sometimes I don't, because I think you have to be really careful. You certainly don't want to make somebody feel bad. I also don't like guilting people into buying my music. But there does need to be some education around that. And I have to be very careful, because I don't like the concept of streaming, and I don't like the monetary setup for streaming. But I also rely very heavily on Tidal and Spotify and Amazon and all the digital service providers that are playing our music. So I have to be really careful around that. So that's one area of education that you have to sort of choose to do. As far as telling somebody that we're indie versus not, I don't know if that's super important. I think one of the only beneficial things to come from COVID is, I think, at least in my experience out here in Vancouver, I think we're seeing the people understanding how much they miss live music and how much they appreciate us, and maybe take us for granted. And for example, like Frankie's. Let's take Frankie's for an example in Vancouver. So they have two restaurants. They have the big restaurant and then they have the jazz club. Well, with no sports and no theater and no cruise ships, the only reason people are going down to the place is for the jazz music, right? My friend Ken Fauser, great tenor player in New York City, same thing at the Django, at the Roxy Hotel. It was a ghost town, but because they had music there, it ended up getting shut down due to the restrictions. The only reason people were going there was for the music. So I think there'll be a greater appreciation for this music as a whole. How long it'll last, I don't know. And whether it will monetarily benefit us in the long term, I don't know. I have a feeling not. Everything will just kind of return to normal. But the specific answer to your question is promoting that you're independent. I don't know. I don't know. But then the other issue that you kind of bring up in your thing is about trying to get people to discover new stuff. And I do find that in Vancouver sometimes. COVID has also helped this, is that pre-COVID times in Vancouver anyways, people came to what they knew. They would come out to what they knew because they were comfortable. COVID happens, things shut down, then things start up again. And people just want to get out. So they're like, well, I don't know this guy, so I'll go check him out. So I think you just have to build your audience any way that you can. That's the most important thing, whether it's through social media, whether it's through creative contesting, whether it's through creative promotion. You just got to build your audience. And this sounds silly, but you got to start one person at a time. That's what I do. And, eventually you have a big mailing list and that kind of stuff, and you go through there. So, Ben doing, yes, thank you. Considering how much you get paid through streaming, that's not bad. Yes, I've had some good luck with streaming revenue for sure. Greg, I'm glad I answered some of your questions. D, again, do you recommend Squarespace or some other style of website for a music biz? First of all, this is more of a general statement around your question. Oh, Paul, I can't wait to get into your question. In general, there's no excuse now. There's no excuse on the planet that you can use for not having professional-looking promotional material. 20 years ago, when I first bought my club, or whenever it was, 20 years ago. Wow, sounds crazy to say. It was different. Websites were expensive. Recording demos was expensive. Doing, that was back, Facebook and stuff wasn't even around. Remember MySpace and all that stuff. It was expensive, clunky, and it was hard to get anything to look good. Now, it's not so. Anybody can record a good sounding demo in their basement. Anybody can get good photos. Anybody can do a professional looking bio. And anybody can do a professional looking website. Now, I don't want to put website designers out of business. That's not my intent. But, you mentioned Squarespace is good. WordPress sites are generally good because they're easy to edit and you can self-edit. So what I've done in the past is got people to do my websites and make sure that they're easily editable. So I get them to do a skeleton site that I can change, so I don't have to call them every time we change something. So you put up a little bit more money up front, but there's really no excuse anymore. And I find a lot of young musicians who are starting out miss that. You should see some of the stuff that comes through my email. It's almost as if there's been no effort made at all. And you used to be able to blame finances on that, but now you can't blame that stuff. So I happen to have a Squarespace site. That's because my designer liked that platform. So I've had good luck with them. Paul, besides approaching bar owners directly, is there any way to get more and better gigs? Woo! You've unleashed a monster. So I have much to say on this, and I'll try to organize my thoughts as good as I can. So Paul, first of all, when you live, another question I get that's similar to yours is, how do I get on the scene in Vancouver? Like, how do I get on the scene? And I have this saying, I say, well, if you want to be on the scene, you need to be seen on the scene you're trying to be seen on. And I'm going to use a very good example. who's a very dear friend of mine. He's become one of my best friends. His name's Jesse Cahill. He's a great drummer from here in Vancouver. That guy did it the right way. When I had the cellar, I had no idea who Jesse was. He would show up. We had a policy at the club, at the Cellar Jazz Club that I owned, that second set was free. And I saw Jesse down there all the time. He would come down. He would meet some people. He introduced himself to me, chatted a little bit, came down a couple weeks later, said, hey, checked it out, came down for a couple paid gigs, like the first set, and actually paid to hang out. And he was seen. I see him talking to musicians. He introduced himself to the musicians, and it was never about, hey, I'm Jesse, give me a gig. Hey, I'm Jesse, can I get a gig? Hey, I'm Jesse, can I get in your band? Hey, Jesse, my name's Jesse, I need to play with you? Like, can I sit in? It was never, ever that. It was always just Jesse coming down to be supportive of the other musicians and to meet people. And eventually, after doing that, when he did approach me, I almost felt like I knew him because I had seen him so much. And I gave Jesse a gig. I didn't know who he was still, other than a guy coming to hang out at the club. Fast forward 15 years, and we've made many records together and done many tours together, and I consider him a very close friend. Research the clubs in your city on the scene that you want to get on. Research the musicians, reach out to people, and don't have this thing in your head that the end result is gig. I got to get a gig. I got to sit in. I got to it can't be that. It's very competitive out there. And myself personally, I get very turned off by that kind of vibe. There are many people who have done it like Jesse has, but the majority of people don't. I get emails from people. I'm like, oh, cool. Have you ever been to Frankie's? No, I don't know anything about Frankie's. Well, you got to, and that's not about me wanting to get one more cover charge for Frankie's or one more meal out of a musician. It's about, you need to research the scene that you're on. And from there, you meet the musicians. Set up a session. Ask people if they want to play. Seek out the jam sessions, which in Vancouver can sometimes be kind of tough because there aren't a lot. But there's a great jam at Pat's Pub that Sharon Minamoto runs. Go down there and do some playing. Don't start with Frankie's Jazz Club. Take a look at what's happening at that club. We have the international touring musicians, and we have the top end local Vancouver musicians. It doesn't take much research to figure out what we're trying to do there. For out of town musicians trying to tour, one thing that really bugs me is when I get calls or emails from musicians say, hey, yeah, my progressive rock band is touring in Vancouver, we're hoping to get a gig. I literally hit delete. I don't even respond. And people are like, wow, you're such a jerk. No, you have done no research. You've looked at clubs in Vancouver and you just started sending your emails. And I guarantee it's probably like that with every other club, and that's not the way. Or, hey, I have a jazz trio. We're coming through on Monday, May 5th. Do you have any openings? Well, obviously you didn't go to our website and see that we don't present music on Mondays. Now, if you did that and you sent an email that said, hey, I see that you don't present music on Mondays, but I'm wondering if you've ever made any exceptions. I got a lot of family in Vancouver, so I could probably get some people out. You start a dialogue with me. Then it's like, oh, you took 2 minutes out of your time, and not even 2 minutes, 10 seconds out of your time to check out the place that you want to play at. This is super, super important. And it's not me trying to be a jerk. It's not me trying to another thing, and and I'm sorry if you're all young out there, I'm not picking on you, but this is a problem with young musicians that makes me crazy. And this happens to me at least once a week. I'll get an email. Yo, what's up? Hoping to get a gig. I got a trio. Let me know what's happening. Really? That's how you approach somebody? Now, you want to call me old school, then call me old school. But that's not, I don't need you to call me sir or bow down to me and show all reverence to me. I'm just a guy trying to do my thing. But yo, what's up? Give me a gig. That's not the way it goes. Take a minute, send a thoughtful email, short, because I can tell you, anybody that's in my position has no time. Don't put your whole life story unless your life story really informs your music. Don't put your life story in there. Just, if you don't know my name because you don't know who books Frankie's, you could take the extra effort and find out, or you could say, to whom it may concern, my name is so-and-so. I've got a jazz quartet. I would love to send you some music. Start a dialogue with me. Don't blah, here it is. And when I started to talk off by saying jazz music, there's no jazz music business for dummies. I mean, not all club owners or presenters are like me. Some might not mind that curt sort of thing, but don't call me brother. Don't treat me like I'm your friend. Don't treat me like we've gone way back. Treat me like a professional, and I will then therefore treat you like a professional and won't delete your email. And I don't mean that to sound threatening. I mean that to sound like I'm trying to give good advice. So that's that. I hope, Paul, that I answered, your question. The other thing I want to say about that is, I should have said this at the beginning. The first thing is, it goes without saying that you need to become the best you can possibly be on your instrument. That never will ever change. But there's a whole other world now that exists out there that you have to have together. Your promotional chops, your social media chops, like all that kind of thing. You'll hear, I don't do this. I think about it, but I don't do it. You'll hear club owners and bookers, very prominent ones, turn you down for a gig because you don't have enough Instagram followers or enough social media followers, which boggles my mind, but it's a real thing. It's a very, very real thing. So you need to try to have that stuff together. I need to know, and this has happened too. My job is to fill the club, whether it's my club or Frankie's. I need to fill the club. So I need to know, and I'm going to do what I do to fill the club. We're going to put it on our website. We're going to send out a mailing list. We're going to provide a really great place for you to play. In the case of Frankie's, we're going to give you guaranteed money. I need you to say you're going to do what you can to get people. We have to work together. That's why I got into this business all those years ago, was because I was sick of club owner and musician working, against each other, working like this. And it used to be, and some old school people are still like this. You're like, look, I just play music. My job is to come to your club and play really great music, and your job is to pay me and you deal with all the other stuff. And I get that line of thinking, but it's not like that anymore. And you can agree with, you can say it's not like that, and you can disagree with the way it is, but that's the way it is. So I need to know. I need some context from you. Like, are you from here? Oh, you have family, and okay, like that'll happen a lot. I say, look, hey, Cory, I know you don't know who I am, but I grew up in Vancouver. I got a lot of family. I think I could probably get, a good crowd of people down there on a Thursday night. Great. That's really good for me to know. That gives us a starting point, to say, okay, good. We can work together and make this a success. So Paul, I hope that helps. Ben, good question. I think I know what you're asking, but what do you take into consideration when negotiating artist fees is the question. Well, that depends. So let's take COVID out of it. Let's talk pre-COVID. We had a pretty set standard at Frankie's where locals would make X amount on the weekends, and it was a little bit lower on the weekdays. But I had more leeway back then to adjust things based on what I thought would work or what wouldn't work. So when I'm negotiating artist fees with people, I mean, first and foremost, let's say I'm bringing in an international band, for example. Okay, so flights, hotels, you're going to have to pay them US dollars. Do I have any sponsorship dollars available to me from my various people? Are there any subsidies? Is the band on a Canada Council touring grant? But are they already going to be in town? Are there educational opportunities? So there's a lot of stuff that goes in. It's just not a set fee. And when you're dealing with my friend Jeremy Pelt, great trumpet player, he gets that when he comes here, he's going to have to play for less than, quite frankly, he wants to. But that's the only way it works. Jeremy thinks long game. That's why Jeremy's here every year, because he's building an audience. He's building a scene here. He's building a thing. So I have to consider US dollars. I have to consider what's going on at that time. Are the Canucks in the Stanley Cup, which of course is never going to happen? Is there a conference? Is there something that could take? Is it the summertime? Is the weather going to hurt our audience? All of those. How many seats do I have in the club? What's my total cost? What does the club need to make? All that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into how I negotiate artist fees. And whether I'm willing to, what night of week it is. I mean, there's so many things, what night of week is it? Okay. So-and-so's only going to be in town on a Thursday. Okay. Are we going to do Thursday, Friday, which have never been successful for me? I'd rather just do one night, and I'd rather do Thursday because I know we can pack it out. All those kinds of things. So there's so much, Ben, that goes into how to negotiate an artist fee. Now, if you're talking about yourself as a musician to a club owner, if you come to me and say, hey, Cory, I know what the local fee is on Thursdays for locals, but I can pretty much guarantee you that I'm going to get 80 people in here, and I think we can charge $20. Okay. Well, let's have a chat about that, and then we can negotiate a higher fee. I've always tried to remain open. And my defense is, well, I paid this person a higher amount of money because they guaranteed me a big crowd, and they delivered on that promise, and we got a big crowd, and everybody does well. So, what people sometimes don't remember is having, I remember I used to talk about this with a door gig. Having 10 people in the crowd I don't have to pay the band a lot of money, but having 10 people in the crowd isn't going to keep the club in business very long. So when there's only 10 people, regardless of whether it's a door gig or a guarantee, the club's not doing well. So all of those things, come into account. I'm at the end of the questions. I need more questions. Come on. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate your kind words. That was a fun record to make, O Solo Mio. A really good time to make that. Come on, guys. I'm here for you. I know there's more questions. There's 16 people on there. Don't make me sign off now. Talk to me. The thing I was talking about, about researching the clubs is a big one for me. That was a big one. Chris Wong, good question. I noticed Frankie's has gone to 4 nights a week. Are we starting to see a return to normalcy in the live jazz scene? Well, first of all, I want to tell you, my role at Frankie's right now is a little bit different. So I don't want to, anything that I'm saying, I'm speaking from what I feel. I'm not speaking on behalf of Frankie's. Yeah, I think of course, I think we're seeing a bit of a return to normalcy, but I touched on this a little bit earlier. I think you're seeing Frankie's is generally packed. When I say packed at 50% capacity. For the better part of the last 2 or 3 months, I think that people are really missing the music. I think it's also a testament to Frankie's for how they're handling the COVID protocols. And the other good thing is we're seeing a lot of new faces, Chris, at Frankie's, which is really cool. It's been a bit of an education for people, like in terms of trying to educate them around noise policies and what have you. But yes, I think there is a bit of a return to normalcy in the live jazz scene. I mean, we've only been open one Thursday, and it was pretty full. This Thursday coming up is looking good for Bruno Hubert. So I think we're starting to see. Hey, Steve-O. I think we're starting to see a return to normalcy, for sure, and that's a good thing. And we try to get it up to 5 nights a week. Of course, we still can't have international acts, but I will tell you that I do have some international acts booked for October and November with an asterisk beside them, you know, because there's some things that have to change. You know, Greg, now you're getting right in there, buddy. Thanks. Great question. But yes, Chris, I think it's a return to normalcy. Now, you know, having said all what I just said, you know, we had 640 cases the other day. So like, we're not out of the woods yet. And the city could shut us down tomorrow for all we know. So, you know, there is that, but it's a good sign that Frankie's is, what it does mean is that Frankie's is it's not a money-making model, only being able to fill your club half full, but they are seeing the benefits of it. So it's great. Hey, Malcolm. Greg, you know, so the question is, you have made some great records with US artists. How does that come about? And is adding a guest artist to a recording a valuable strategy? What I can tell you is it's been an extremely, extremely valuable strategy for me. I didn't set out to do it that way. It just kind of happened. And now that I look back, I mean, it's sort of obvious to why and how it happened. My first recording it's not true, not my first recording I ever made, but my first sort of jazz recording was made with Dr. Lonnie Smith, and that was a fluke. You know, that's not something that I really envisioned. And then, you know, what you have to understand if you don't know me is that my whole thing was about building relationships and continues to be building relationships. And so I built a great relationship with Jim Rotundi, and he recorded on my actually, that was my second record as a leader. I've made a lot of records, for better or for worse. I made a lot of records. The answer to your question is yes, it's a good strategy, but I never sacrificed my music or what I wanted to do just to have a special guest. Every record that I've put out and recorded with a special guest happened very organically, and I think that's really important. Now, I mean, having said that, if you're sitting there, Greg, what do you play, just to give me some perspective? Like, you know, if you're like if you're a drummer and Christian McBride's your favorite bass player and you really want to set out to do that, like, that's a dream, by all means do it. I'm just saying that, I guessed right. I don't know why I guessed that right. But everything I had was relationship based. My record with Joey DeFrancesco, I mean, I brought Joey to the club 3 times before, and it was actually Joey that broached the subject of doing something with me. Mike Lennon, Joe Farnsworth, and Peter Bernstein are 3 guys that I absolutely love, that I hung out with a lot in New York before things, you know, kind of came up. Steve Davis, you know, same thing. So it was a very good strategy for me. It's proved to be very successful. Having said that, some of my non-special guest records have done very well. You know, but it was a good strategy for me, and it's a good strategy, I think, for anybody. But as long as it's organic and as long as it's not forced, that's just my opinion about it. Malcolm, adding streaming component to the shows. Wow, isn't that a relevant question right now? Streaming has been an interesting one, for sure. I started doing streams in July. I did some of these kinds of things, these YouTube things, just doing, I called them tales of a club owner that were like this. They were free, and they were good. And then I dipped my toe into doing some live streams and selling tickets. And at the start, I did really well. I sold 80 tickets, 100 tickets at $15, 85. And then it went like this, to the point now where it's hard to do. It's hard to generate. And there's fatigue around streaming. Everybody's doing it. There's really great free stuff online. So I found it really difficult now to make that a monetary success. I do think there's still a lot of value in it, regardless of the monetary, benefit. So I've started a partnership with Shadbolt, and I've done some stuff there. I've continued to do some of my own streaming with the studio in New York City. Frankie's has not jumped on the streaming train. I think that they should. And I think for various different reasons they have it. The main one being, and again, I'm not speaking for Frankie's, but this is a crazy time for restaurants and restaurant owners. Like, they're just trying to concentrate on keeping their staff employed and keeping the doors open. And I have great respect for that. But I think streaming is something that we all need to look at moving forward, regardless of having the vaccine. I think it will become something that is here for time, but I think that it will be a bonus in terms of monetary. I don't think it can sustain itself as a. I don't think it can sole model, if you know what I mean. I think that's hard. At least I don't see a way to do that. Smalls is streaming every day for free. Now the quality isn't as good as like some of the really pro streams where you're getting the 5 cameras and what have you, but the concept is there and it's awesome. So yeah, so I hope that answers your question, Malcolm. Mark Lemieux, how did you break into the New York scene from Vancouver? Great question. Thank you. I broke into the New York scene the same way I was telling young musicians to break into any scene. Start going to the clubs. I took my first trip to New York, I think, in 2002. I had some friends there, so it's not like I was going in cold. I knew Chris Terry, great bass player, who was living there, and I ended up staying with him. But I just started going to the clubs. I went to Smalls and I met the owner. I went to Smoke and I met Paul Stash and Frank Wright. I wanted to meet the owners, and I just said, my name's Cory, and I own a club in Vancouver, and I just wanted to say hello. I met Ian Hendrickson Smith. He was one of the first people that I met. I got a record of his. I looked him up. I said, I'm taking my first trip to New York. I'd love to meet you. And, all these years later, where he's one of my best friends. So it's about, if you want to be on a scene, you need to be seen on the scene that you want to be seen on. I mean, that's really what it's about. Go and meet people. Go and say hello to musicians, And I didn't go to New York and immediately try to meet Kenny Garrett or Ron Carter or George Coleman. I went to some of the smaller clubs and met the people that were kind of the fabric of the scene, kind of the underlying, the Jim Rotundis, the Eric Alexanders, the Mike Ledons, the Peter Bernstein. Those are the people that I really wanted to meet. And that's how I did it. And then I started bringing them to Vancouver. And even before I had a club, in fact, I was bringing them to Vancouver before I had even been to New York. And taking a risk. Some people, we touched on this a little bit earlier. Some people have made some assumptions on me based on false information and just false judgment that I somehow came from money and that I had financial support from day one. And it's easy for me because I had a club. Look, none of that is true. My parents remortgaged their house to buy me my club. They're not rich people. And my dad was very much against it. I ended up having a lot of investment help, and I ended up being surrounded by a lot of very supportive people, both emotionally and financially. But, back in the early club days, I had to move home, and live with my parents and do all that kind of stuff. But I still, to this day, I am a risk taker. I like the risk and I like the reward part of it. So I try to never let money stop me from doing anything that I want to do. And not everybody's like that, so it doesn't work out, for some people, and that's fine. But for me, that's the way it works. I mean, I like the risk. So I just take the financial part and I go, okay, what do I need to do? I need to come up with, and I'm in a different position now because I have a career and I have some savings and I have, access to credit if I need it and those kinds of things. But even back then, I had a line of credit. I put my first record on Stellar Live out with Ross Taggart purely on my line of credit. So I have that mentality and I have that belief and I have that drive to try to make things successful and not let the financial part stand in the way, if you will. So again, not everybody's like that, so it doesn't work for everybody. I'm very honest about what I can do. It's one of the things about being in Canada, being a presenter and a record label owner in Canada. Like, I mean, if we had an on par dollar, I could probably pay better than most record companies could. But I'm not on par dollar. I'm 30% down, maybe a little less right now. So, when you come to Vancouver, and I've worked with some musicians who don't understand what it means to perform and come to Canada. It's like, nope, I want X amount of dollars and I don't care about your situation. And that's totally fine. I just can't do, I just can't do anything about that. It's the perils of living in a Canadian city and living in a city that's, the left coast, away from New York where all the action is. So just do your best to work within the confines of what you have, and that's what I've tried to do. I didn't have any sort of time limit. I mean, we're at an hour, and the questions seem to have slowed down, so I don't necessarily need to go anywhere. But please continue to ask away if there's other stuff that you want to know. The streaming one, Malcolm, you got me thinking about the streaming thing. Still, it's an interesting one. It's gonna be really interesting to see what happens when all this. When all of this stops, or the world returns back to a normal place. Anybody? Come on, there's no internet trolls out there that want to put me on the spot. Come on, Caldestad. I know you got something you want to try to goad me into. Come on. Who's the first big name you want to bring to Vancouver once the border opens? That's a very good question. Well, what I can tell you as far as what we have coming up, we have tentatively scheduled Carl Allen and Eric Reed. Carl Allen, great drummer, and Eric Reed, a wonderful pianist, to come to Vancouver to record with the great John Lee. John will be playing bass. I think I'm playing tenor on a few tracks, although I'll have to go back and check. And also Reedy Rosnes, Lewis Nash, Neil Swainson, Kelly Jefferson, and Brad Turner are set to come to Vancouver in November to record Neil Swainson's quintet record that'll come out on our label. So those are two, like, off the top of my head. I'd really like to get Jeremy Pelt back out here. I'd really like to get Ben Patterson back out here. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. It's going to be interesting to see what happens when things return, like how airfares are going to be, how hotel costs are going to be. It's going to be interesting to see what if the economics have changed, because that's a big thing, like the airline industry, of course, right? So, as to I think it was Ben DeDune that asked about artist negotiation fees, like. The two recordings I mentioned, those were already scheduled. Now I got to go back and look at the budget again and say, like, can we still do this? Like, is a flight from New York now going to be $800? Like, I don't know. It's going to be $900. It's going to be $1,000. Like, well, what's it going to be? So we're going to have to kind of wait and see. And, I'm assuming when the border opens, it also means that clubs will be allowed to be at full capacity, but that's also a thing. Like, until Frankie's can seat 80 or 85 or 90 people again, we're going to kind of be in this same kind of boat. So we'll have to see, what happens with that. I want to get Oliver Gannon back to the club. I mean, Oliver's kind of in that demographic that has to be really careful. So he hasn't played the club for a long time, and there's always an extra skip in my step when Oliver Gannon's on the stage at the club. So, and then big people. I can't even remember, we had Gary Samulian was booked. Just all the cats, all the New York cats that I love have come to love so much. I want to bring them all back and, get it happening again where we can do, so anyways, that's that, Steve-O. Anybody else? Come on, don't make me go outside and enjoy the sunshine. Actually, maybe it's starting to rain. I got a little bit more time if there's more questions. I'm trying to think of stuff hey, Lewis, how are you, man? Good point. That's a good question. I was just talking with somebody about this the other day. Probably many people on this thread haven't put out a record of their own yet. So Lewis is asking what I consider to be a successful jazz album in the way of sales. And the question is not as easy as you would think. I tend to not, you have the CD. I always use I'll use my record. I'm not doing this to name drop, but I'll use my Joey DeFrancesco record. So I did a record, a live record with Joey DeFrancesco, and I paid him a wheelbarrow full of money, that he fully deserved because he's Joey DeFrancesco, and I was happy to do it. And if you did the math around that record, it would have been mathematically impossible to make back my money with one pressing of that CD. But what that gig and what that record brought me is so much greater. I got 3 nights at the club with Joey. I got a feature performance in Pittsburgh, a headlining gig in Pittsburgh using Joey DeFrancesco, which I'll never forget. That I was able to combine that with a trip to New York, which got some business done for me. And Joey DeFrancesco came back when I closed my club and did 3 nights with me again, which he doesn't do for people. I mean, of my stature, like he would do it for the big guys, but didn't play with with regional people, I guess, if you will. So did I lose money on the making of that CD? Yes, they're sold out, but I lost money. This almost sounds way too simplified, but I take all of my activities together and I say, as long as I'm bringing in more than I'm putting out, then it's as a whole a success. Did I make money on this record? No, probably not, but I made a little bit of money on this record. Did I make money on this record? No, but I got a major tour out of it, and that was great. So it's hard, but if you want an honest question, we press generally 1,000 of our CDs, and if I can go through those, that would generally be a successful CD for me. Now we're having to change things a little bit because we're having a little more trouble selling the regional releases, like the local releases. Those releases stand up to some of the best releases on the label, but because we're from Vancouver, they just don't get the notice and they don't get the radio play that other releases get. So there's that. Colin, no, I did not put out my first album on Cellar. The only reason I didn't was because I didn't have the Cellar. I had a collective band called Crash. We put out 2 records on a label called Mo Funk. But my first jazz record as a leader was called Big Weeds, and that came out on my label. And as far as wanting to put out a record during the pandemic, I don't think to do with putting out a record or not putting out a record. What I can tell you is that labels did 2 things during the pandemic: laid off or just kept going the way they were going and accelerated. And I say accelerated because that's what I did. I made the choice. I'm like, I'm just going to keep doing my thing. I got to get all these records out. So I just kept going. That was one of the smartest things I did because a lot of people were trapped at home. A lot of people, somebody asked earlier in the talk about, promoting the fact that we're independent. I think a lot of people, any reasonably intelligent person knows that artists got really stung quite badly by this pandemic. And so there were a lot of people out there that were willing to support and help. And sometimes they were willing to just call and say, here's $100. Sometimes they would go to the website and buy $50 worth of records. So we saw an uptake in our web sales and a massive uptake in web sales. Our distributor, the beginning of the pandemic, or maybe kind of the middle of the pandemic, said they'd had 2 of their best months they'd had in 10 years. So yeah, I don't think a pandemic has anything to do with it. Studios are operating, studios are recording music. So, I don't think the pandemic should affect any way you approach putting out your first record. Just do your thing. There shouldn't be anything standing in your way unless you're planning on using a US artist that you want to bring into Canada. Then you're kind of hooped. Yes, no, no problems, no problems there at all. All right. One other thing I was going to say, just while everybody, maybe the questions are going to end, but if you're still thinking about some questions, I'm happy to do this more. I would encourage you to email me if you have other questions, and then I can kind of tell if I've got enough to go on to do another one of these talks. I put my email in the chat there, so write it down. I'm a very easy guy to find on Facebook and what have you. So please try to find me. Anything else? There's got to be more out there. Come on, don't leave me hanging. Yeah, Colin, my pleasure, man. Thanks for coming along for the ride here. Steve, left you all of the Sonny Chris records. I have left you all of the Dave Brubeck records, and I have left you all of the Mangione brother records. So there you go. Yeah, that's a pretty crazy record collection over a lot of time. But you could also just buy it off me before I die too. That's another option. Anything else out there, people? We're still at 16 people. I know not all of you have asked a question. Are there any of my New York friends out there listening? Anybody that completely disagrees with everything I'm saying? It wouldn't be the first. It wouldn't be the first time. Steve, I will not outlive you all. Not at the rate I'm going, anyways. I gotta look at that reel-to-reel player over there. That's pretty cool. No more any more specific questions? Yeah. Hints as to what's coming. Yeah, sure. I can tell you exactly. I can give you lots of hints and lots of stuff. Luis, that's a great question. First, Colin, any hints? Yeah, we've got our release schedule is busier than it's ever been. This is going to be one of our busiest years. You heard me mention the John Lee record earlier and the Neil Swainson Quintet record. We've got is it called a posthumous release from Shannon Gunn, a record that she recorded in 2001, actually. And she passed away a couple years ago. That's coming out also with Renee Rosnes. Great trumpet player named Bruce Harris is coming out with a record. We're putting out a live at the Cellar with Gary Simulian and Joe Magnarelli that was recorded back in 2011. Super, super excited about that. That's going to be a lot of fun. A really great record. Oh, so many great records. A great record from a wonderful young singer, saxophone player named Michael Stevenson with the Alexander Claffey Trio. We have an Alexander Claffey Quintet record coming out with Nicole Glover on tenor saxophone. Stephen Riley's coming out with a record. Steve Maddock is coming out with a record. The Nightcrawlers are coming out with a record. I'm coming out with my strings record. We'll be doing some more live streams as well, and we're talking about some other stuff too. So we had a great fundraiser that's still going on for 11 more days, and we've raised almost $20,000, which is really exciting. So I'm happy about that. But yeah, lots of stuff. It's a big year. It's a very, very big year for the label. So I'm quite excited about it. Luis, yeah, we have recorded lots of records that have not come out. One of them I can tell you, I'll tell you about a couple of them, was that we had a Nightcrawlers record with Red Holloway that didn't come out because we had a technical glitch, and we had a technical glitch, and we couldn't get it. Sorry guys, just answering a question here. We couldn't get it out. because there was a technical glitch, and we paid a lot of money for that record. That was not happening. An Oliver Gannon trio record that we recorded, just nobody was happy with it. The band wasn't happy with it. I wasn't happy with it, so we didn't put it out. Another record, Ron Small did a great record with Bob Murphy, and we had some terrible, terrible technical glitches on that one. That was really frustrating that didn't come out. I was very upset about that, and felt really bad that we couldn't get that happening. But yeah, that didn't happen. So lots of records that didn't come out, and a lot of time it's because they just don't sound good or technical glitches. So it does happen. Colin, that's an interesting question. It was a great record. Josh kind of dropped off the face of the earth, and I'm going to wait till he kind of reaches out. I don't want to make any judgments on how people are dealing with this pandemic, but I'm also not pushing people, at this point. So that was a great record that we recorded. So we don't know what's going to happen yet. So we'll see what happens. That brings us about an hour and 50 minutes in. I think I'm gonna hit it. Go do other things now. But I appreciate you guys all tuning in, and always happy to answer questions. Please, if you have more questions, please take my email. It is up in the chat, but I'll put it there again. Send me an email, and I'll schedule another one of these if you think it's valuable. So. Good to see you all on here. Hope any of this was helpful, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Ciao.